People are always asking me, Davis, why do you like to read comics? This happens every day of my life. So we figured we'd take a couple minutes and just talk about why we like comics. Starting off, I think this is a huge one. Comics have a pretty rich history just in our culture in general and are largely influential on pop culture at large. We see this with movies and TV, especially video games. A lot of them are based in comics. I think this is largely due to the fact that comics are so easy to produce that you can kind of take a lot of big creative risks with them, and you can get a lot of fun, really cool ideas that otherwise other genres, other mediums wouldn't necessarily allow you to take.
Yeah, have access to. Kind of 2 points on that. When I was in art history class, one of the really interesting things that I saw is we were looking at like ancient Egyptian art. And so much of it, I'm sure there's a specific term. I'm a terrible artist in terms of knowing terms. But sequential art is so prolific through sort of many ancient cultures, but specifically Egyptian cultures, not just like in hieroglyphic walls, but where they're telling stories sequentially, but they're also doing it. There's a term for it. I wish I would remember. I might look it up, but where it's like brackets of storytelling, right? Where it's sort of like, this is part one, this is act one of the story of, the Nile, and then subsequent panels dictate the story. And so it's sort of interesting that comics, even if they haven't been known as comics, have just been a historical ancient form of storytelling that humans have utilized for so long.
And that it's stuck around to modern day even is pretty cool.
Well, just that concept of sequential art, just, what makes comics so wonderful. Because to me, sequential art doesn't necessarily mean like linear or like A to B. It just means, one step after the other.
Images meant to be interpreted in order.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're taking a bunch of images all together, combining it with words, which is the big part of comics, is that marriage between words and images. You're putting them all into a single page, and then what I kind of love about the reading of comics in relationship to that is that you then, as the reader, have to almost like interpret it. Not and obviously a successful comic is going to be really legible for you to see how that narrative connects from panel to panel. But I just appreciate that there's sort of like a level of investment that you as a reader need to, and not in a way that's like, oh, this is the gatekeeping kind of thing, or like you have to be a certain intelligence level to understand this. No, not at all. That's the fun of comics, is it's accessible to anyone who is willing to engage with it on that level.
And I think this is a point we'll probably cover in a minute, but a lot of successful comic creators kind of are aware of that and utilize it in their creation of their story. Like just the fact that like when it comes to dictating pace or when it comes to dictating scale, like you can really use that part of it separate. Again, like this is something that's like super unique to the medium of you can really stretch or compress time in a way that you really can't do in films or in literature or anything like that either. It's pretty unique to the medium in that regard.
There's an excellent, and one of these days I'd like to do an episode about like making comic books, like books about making comic books. Obviously, like Scott McCloud is sort of like the kingpin of producing like sort of intelligent, thoughtful documentation about how it's done. But that whole like time and pacing and everything, there's a really great section of his book where he showcases the use of panels almost as if you're dictating time, because you are, in extent, but showcasing how they essentially represent beats or frames, like how we would see images like in stop motion or like with film or music even, things sort of have a rhythm to it, and you can extend that or decrease it, a lot of the time, like if you want to showcase the passage of time, you showcase the same image multiple times and with either minor changes, or obviously if you want to showcase like hundreds and thousands of years, you can kind of showcase that through many images, or even just like four. Like that's the power of comics, is that you can use as little or as much of what is available to you to tell your story, and it's up to the artist or the author or the creator or whoever's inventing this comic to sort of make that interpretation accessible for the reader.
Another reason we are big fans is how accessible comics are and how budget friendly they are. historically, comics were really cheap and seen as almost disposable. They're printed on cheap paper. It was something you could be 10 years old and go down to a newsstand and pick up a new issue for, like, back in the day, probably like 10 cents, you know, like.
Well, I mean, it's not so much just comics, but like not ancient times, but like Victorian times, or even sort of like early, Manifest Destiny times. Like, you had the concept of the dime novel, or you had the concept of the penny dreadful, sort of these, which is more literature based than comics, but I think it sort of laid the groundwork for making comic work possible. Like, another art history thing that I learned about is, like, in Mexico, during like the 1900s, printmaking became such a prolific way of information dispersal, because you had a lot of, unfortunately, like, people who were poor and living in remote areas that weren't able to learn how to read and write, but they can recognize imagery. And so images became a huge part of, like, politicizing big groups. And so I think that's where you get that introduction of the image to the word with comics, of, even if people aren't able to read, even though reading is a huge aspect of comics, bringing in images that they can decipher and understand is sort of like an extra. Some people see it as like a way of weakening something, but I see it as like an extra hand forward to.
It's a good way of just making it, accessible to historically people who might have been illiterate or not had access to the same level of education as, like, upper class people might have. It's a good way of just sharing ideas, sharing messages in a way that's like just super easy to understand. There's no pretense about it. It's very just you can make sense of a political cartoon satirizing the king or whoever.
It's an accessible form of media that can be made more or less complicated based on who is producing it, but for the most part, like, early comics and just sort of, I guess, widespread mass produced to an extent. Not that, like, other than, modern comics mass production, but at that era, mass produced, like, it's accessible to the most amount of people at one time, depending on, obviously, if they're interested in checking it out or not. But it's also coming from a time and place in which, books, information, knowledge, that's all power that people of privilege have. And, the further back you go, the less likely that, like, an everyday person would have access to something like that. So I think the comic book kind of can be representative of like, the common person's access to not only entertainment, but information. I mean, comics can be, that's the magic of comics. They can be educational. They can be purely entertainment. Talking about comics and zines sort of as like a marriage of one, like, zines I feel like are just a slightly less produced, depending on the form of it, a slightly less produced version of a comic, but it does the same thing of using words and images to sort of convey concepts. And so zines in and of themselves are sort of like a more like word driven comic, but I feel like they're both doing the same thing and have that same purpose of being accessible to the most people at one time, and in like a format that is accessible. I mean, it's not like there are huge tomes of comics, especially now that comics have been around for so long and series run on for so long, you can have these huge tomes, but for the most part, it's usually like a small handheld piece of a couple pages of paper that you can open up and just enjoy straight from the get-go, especially early comics.
Yeah. Well, there's something just like intuitive to the way they're structured that I think maybe when we were little we're taught how to do that, but, like, I don't remember being, like, learning how to read a comic. Even, I mean, like, it's intuitive, like, word bubble, thought bubble, sequential images. These are the same people in different moments in time. There's something so base about just, from newspaper strips to comic books to even just single frame, like single image political comics. Like, you understand the relationship here between all the different elements.
It's almost
like a
innate.
very just base, just like a super, like, almost instinctual level.
And I know there are people who, like, are interested in the hobby that maybe don't feel like they can read comics, or maybe don't understand how the flow works. But I think the thing is if given any amount of time just like looking at the page, I feel like it can begin to...
You can at least kind of start to figure out what things mean.
And if you're having a hard time, that might be indicative of the fact that the creator is not as successfully conveying that idea.
Utilizing the in the same way there's like a language to cinema or a language to film, there's a language to comics to how it's meant to be read. And I've read some that admittedly like they're probably not utilizing it great, or they're trying something that's not necessarily landing.
That the idea from their brain to the page to your mind is sort of, there's something lost in that translation for sure. And that's with any medium, anything can be sort of difficult to parse through if you don't really have that understanding. But the power of comics is that there is an access point on like literally every level of what you're interested in reading. Like at least for me, I'm not exclusively just reading like superhero comics necessarily. Like I love, to use the term graphic novel as a librarian would prefer to call them, to make them feel better about buying comics and putting them in the library. Like I like multiple genres of comic creation. But even if you just look at a superhero comic, there are many levels of readership that there are ones meant to be for all ages. And like when I think of all ages, I don't think, oh, this is super kiddie and dumbed down. It's more just like, it's appropriate that anyone at any age can look at it and be like, oh, I kind of get what's happening. I think that there should be a distinction between all ages and like something that's specifically made for kids.
Yeah, well, and you see that in comics like Bone, for example. Like, it's sold at the reason it's one of like the best selling comics ever produced is because they sell it at book fairs. But you read it, it's also like just like super well done. It's super engaging. Like it doesn't feel like I'm reading something. I'm not watching an episode of like Little Einsteins when I'm reading Bone. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I think that's again like a testament to just how widespread you can share ideas or share stories that land with so many people. If it's easy for kids to understand and engage with, and still engaging for adults, it's a very successful utilization of the medium, in my opinion.
Well, I think like Calvin and Hobbes is another great example of that, where like I liked reading Calvin and Hobbes as a kid. I'm pretty sure my dad had a couple of like the big collections where it would just be, I don't know,
like the like couple pages color strip, color pages, and then the strips.
Exactly that. And for me, when I picked that up, it wasn't like because like, man, I really like Calvin and this Crazy Tiger. Like it was just because it was a comic. Is why I picked it up in the first place. And, reading that as a kid, you still find it enjoyable. You still find it fun. You relate to the kid aspects of it. You relate to the childish aspects of Calvin and in your imagination and, making your own fun, having your imaginary friend, whatnot. And then you can still go back to it as an adult. And now you view it through like his parents' lens of being like, man, this kid is crazy. And like, they're always funny. And you kind of get their perspective a lot more. But the comic hasn't changed. It is just your perspective has changed, and I think that's what's really powerful about any successful medium, but comics in particular, is that there's always a good comic. There's always something to come back to and to get more from with changing perspectives, especially if it's meant to be for anyone.
Yeah, we should do an episode on Calvin and Hobbes. That was a pretty big one for me as a kid, reading a lot too. It's good stuff.
It is good stuff. I've not looked at it in quite a while. And obviously, like, modern meme culture has, like, significantly ruined aspects of Calvin and Hobbes. Because you have, like, the invasion of, like, boomer meme culture. Like, not that Minions were ever cool, but Minions are definitely never going to be cool now. No matter how many times you try to trick us into seeing those movies. Yeah, it's just... I would love to do a Calvin and Hobbes episode.
Admittedly, comics are not as accessible now as they used to be, largely due to at least regular titles pretty much only existing in direct markets now. You used to be able to go and even when we were kids, and we talked about this in our last video or a couple videos ago about how even when we were growing up, you could still get the digests at the store. You could still get like Archie and Veronica or whatever, the Jughead comics. We weren't seeing Spider-Man and X-Men at the store like there used to be. A large part of that was kind of the big shift in the 90s to collector markets, and guessing how much a comic is going to be worth.
Like the speculation market.
Yeah. Which kind of ruined comics for a while.
Well, it kind of ruins any hobby, when you start to, like, obviously your hobby should have value. I say this as someone who likes to buy Lego, and I look at that kind of stuff. But it does sort of take the fun out of it because it adds another level of gatekeeping, which I dislike. Comics should have no gatekeeping. Obviously, if you want it to be like a investment thing, hobby, that's separate. I think you should treat that separately. But you're right. It did make it so, I love comic book shops. I'm glad that those exist. I'm glad that they still exist. But it sort of made that transition from, maybe this is something a little bit more widespread. And to an extent, I think it can be. I know, like, right after Superman came out, there was reports that, like, 7-Elevens were bringing out their comic book stands again and throwing up some easy Superman comics and stuff. I don't know if that was anything more than just capitalizing on, like, people thinking about something and being quick to jump on it. But
I've seen kind of a resurgence. Even, like, you go to the mall on a Saturday, there's probably some collector tables of people selling. A lot of this has to do with, I think, the trading card market being so huge right now, but you see it with comics a lot and vintage games and stuff now too, where people are coming and trying to either like display collections or sell stuff. I even saw it at the coffee shop yesterday. There was a little stand that they had some like cool vintage comics that they're clearly working with like a local collector on or something, selling some stuff there. But
that's cool.
It's cool to see it kind of coming back and being something people are like, oh yes, this is a valuable, cool hobby that people are into, and it's worth showcasing in it more than just like the little strip mall stores.
Well, there's there's an intimidation factor when it comes to comic book shops, and I don't mean in like scary sometimes, but people have preconceived notions when it comes to like either nerd culture or geek stuff, and unfortunately, like, because these places are sort of a catch-all, you catch all sorts of people, and so not everyone feels comfortable walking into a comic book shop, which is unfortunate, you know. And I think that has to do with either that local community, that shop's community. The nice and bad thing about like a comic book shop is that they are usually owned privately. Like the person running the shop owns that place, and they're doing it out of the passion of either their hobby or the love of the game, and so it depends on what their sort of behavioral ideology, I guess, is, right? I've been to shops that I'm like, I really don't like this place. Like, there's just something off about it, or the people, not necessarily the patrons, but just the people working there, like, don't make you feel welcomed. But I've also been to other places where I felt incredibly welcomed and really excited to be there. So I think that hopefully the culture can kind of change surrounding that, because here's a big thing that a lot of people don't get right now in the world. If you like something and you want it to keep happening, you need other people to also keep liking that. It's
good when the thing you like gets bigger.
It is.
Almost every time.
Every time.
It's good.
Like, and I know that can lead to diminishing returns to some people, but you can't be upset that something is dead, that a hobby's dead, that no new stories are occurring when
you actively try to discourage people from engaging with it. Yeah. Well, that's something I think we both are actively kind of trying to push against with this channel, and just with our general personal engagement with comics, of just like any hobby, just like any, like with sports or film or music, you're gonna have the gatekeeping buttholes who are just like, they think they're really special for knowing or liking something, and that's threatened when someone else starts to understand it or like it. That exists. I think it's overblown how much that exists in comics, and again, just kind of like geek culture. Those people are there. fuck those people, just leave them alone. Like they don't.
They're making money off of making you mad.
Yeah. So I think just don't. If there's any creators that are like that, the best thing you can do is just don't engage with that. If there are any people in your actual life, like people who do own shops, don't patronize those shops. Like, there are plenty of other people out there that are trying to sell, trying to get more people exposed to it for the love of it, and just genuinely trying to share something they're passionate about. This idea of like, being like a real fan of something is baloney.
If you enjoy something, you're a fan of it.
Yeah.
You know, and at any level, like for me, example, with like something like music, I'm not one of those people that gets super like, I need to know the life story of this particular artist. And I need to know everything that they went through that led them to this moment. You know, for me, some of that can be fun, and some hobbies I do that with. But for me, sometimes if I'm enjoying a song, I kind of just am happy enjoying the song, you know, and that's okay. You know, and if you deep dive into that song, you learn why every note is there. I'm not gonna be like, this guy, this loser. You know, like, you know, everyone needs to lift up each other in terms of like their engagement and approach it on that level of like, even if we like this in different ways to different extents, we both still like it. You know.
There's really no wrong way to engage with honestly with any media. Well, I shouldn't say that. There are wrong ways to engage with media, but
media literacy is important.
But as far as just enjoying entertainment, there's really not a wrong way to do that. There's not a correct way to hop into comics. That's something that's like with our Tales from the Bin show we're trying to do is like, you can pick up literally any random dollar bin comic and get some value out of it. You know?
Yeah, that's exactly like that show. The channel at large is meant to showcase that a love for comic books can come from many different places. If you're someone who maybe doesn't feel comfortable going to a comic book shop, or maybe there's so many other facets to it that you're not interested in, that becomes overwhelming. On this channel, we're here to showcase that you can find comics in so many places, some of them which you might not expect, and some of them for free, you know, like the library. The library is a great place to find comic books. If you want, to me, I find the library a very comforting place. I know some people are weirded out by libraries because they service everyone. I think that's amazing. That's an amazing
good.
Part of libraries is that, you know, be it you're a kid during summer vacation and your parents kicked you out of the house and you don't have anything to do, you can go there. To you're someone who is cold and you know, needs down on your luck and you need just a warm place to exist because every human deserves that basic right. You can be served there. Anyone is welcome there, and they have, at least in our area, we have many great libraries, all of which have pretty decent comic collections.
Yeah.
You know, a big thing for me getting back into comics when I was a teen was my high school library, and I was a library aide, and so I could sometimes tell my librarian like, hey, I'm actually really interested in checking this out. Would you be willing to like loan it from another source or order it for the library or something? You know, library is a great place to find stuff. The library also provides services for multiple mediums, but for comics specifically, you can check out Hoopla, hoopla.com. Using your library card, you can get up to 5 or 6 different titles. The nice thing is a lot of it is new. So like, I know that you use a service like that you pay for to read some comics digitally, but if you maybe aren't reading that many things, but you want to stay up to date with a couple things, like say like the absolute titles for one, anytime a trade comes out physically, it's available on Hoopla digitally. So, and again, if you have tickets, you can read it for free. But then also like there's other shops. There's, you know, almost every thrift store I've seen has a couple comics in it. A lot of those like used video game stores in the mall have some. I was just at one recently and I was like, man, I keep forgetting that they have comics. I need to come here and like spend a couple, like 30 minutes just digging through everything to see if I can find anything interesting. You know, Thrift Books is a really great resource online as well. Particular for any book, but particular for like big either tomes or trades or something a little bit older that you're kind of worried about, like that speculator market kind of surrounding. Do you have any other suggestions?
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of owned by the evil corporate overlords, but Comixology is cheap and a good way to. They have a lot of good stuff on there. Yeah, it's like $6 a month. I know they got bought by Amazon, but it's $6 a month. I don't like.
That's one of those things where I feel like I agree. Like evil corporation, I try not to use Amazon as much as possible, but it's sort of like you live in a world in which you can choose to make that decision if you want to engage with that or not.
And then there's the Libby app, which is kind of like Hoopla. My local library doesn't go through Hoopla; it goes through Libby, and that has, I don't think, as good of a comic selection as Hoopla does, but there's still some good stuff on there that I've been able to read. Yeah, and then just used bookstores, like they're just popping up. Checking out collector markets at, especially the mall, or every few months there's probably going to be some sort of convention somewhere where there'll be a lot of people selling stuff. That's a good way to just engage with people who are passionate and also really knowledgeable, and hopefully find some cool stuff.
Or find people either in your life or in your community that are also interested in it, because depending on the person, like if they're anything like the people I know, they're very generous and they want to share their love of something with you. And so like you and I, we will exchange books,
swap stuff
often,
all the time,
because then that means like, why there are some that we double up on, but it's sort of like I could buy these 3 titles, you could buy these 3 titles, and then now we have 6 titles between the two of us that we can both enjoy at one time if we wanted to. I'm very fortunate. My brother is very generous, and a lot of the time he either lends stuff to me or he picks something up for me. Like there are people out there, and if they're in the hobby and they're not a jerk, they want to share their love with you.
They'll let you borrow some books.
Yeah. I just think that's like, and that's also kind of a fun, I don't know. It's like when your friend tells you to listen to a song, like there's something weirdly vulnerable about that. Like whenever I'm showcasing you, I'm like, dude, I think that you'll like this. Like there's kind of, you're taking a step out, but I think that's kind of fun because you're sharing a piece of either yourself or something you're interested in with someone else. And comics is such like a powerful tool for doing that.
We kind of touched on this earlier, unique storytelling capabilities that comics have that other mediums are kind of not as well equipped to engage with or portray. Specifically, like we kind of touched on how you can really squeeze or stretch time. You can also really do some cool stuff, and this is a huge thing with comics, with composition and page layout. You can make pages hit like a freaking truck that are just like, name dropping the same dude we name drop every video, Daniel Warren Johnson, is
maybe we should get like an alert.
Yeah, a master of this, of like when he needs a moment, when he needs something to really like kind of punch you in the face, he's really good at that. In a way that you just couldn't necessarily do in a movie. Movies, you're obviously limited to whatever aspect ratio you're shooting in. Novels, you're limited to text. So you can't necessarily, like, in the way that, like, you can't be reading a horror novel and go, like, not that you would necessarily do that reading a horror comic, but you could turn a page and be like, holy shit,
that's like, there's a power to it of, it's sort of like, another feature, as you're saying, of the comic is how you actually like physically engage with it. Obviously, you don't have to exclusively engage physically. That's my preference, but I read both. I just read when I can, in any case. But like, there's a science behind like page reveals or having something spread across 2-page. There's a power of the not just what's the context of it, but like the function of actually reading it plays a huge role. Because like you said, there's a page turner aspect with like reading a book or something, but with comics, I don't know. There's something more about like your eyes moving around the page a lot more. The turning of the page. There are many instances in which sometimes you're prompted to go back or look in different ways or turn the book. Like there's something. It's like I said. There's a investment part where it's sort of less like one-to-one, like thing to brain. There's a relationship forming between you and the comic, and you don't have to read it like that either. You can just be like, cool, whatever.
Yeah, and Yeah, like you can skip through. I sometimes find myself, especially if I'm not like super into the art on the page, I do read it more kind of like a book. There's like, you obviously take in what's happening in the panels for the context, but you're not really necessarily soaking in everything that they're doing. And sometimes that's the intention, is like they don't want you to hang on a panel very long. You know, they want this to flow. And then sometimes there'll be a huge double page spread that's super highly detailed, and you're like, spend a second looking at this.
Yeah, take your time.
So and then another thing, again, that we kind of touched on earlier is just comics are really good at taking risks, and you can do a lot with a comic that would cost tons of money, or depending on when it came out, might have been impossible to do on film. The example I have listed here is like what Ditko was doing with Doctor Strange. All this just trippy, psychedelic, crazy stuff is like, maybe you could have animated it, but again, that would have been insanely expensive. But like, just the way you can take that idea and communicate it on a page, and someone can take that in, and it can be so just like, wow, this is crazy. And that still happens with even modern comics. As an example I'm thinking of was like the Silver Surfer Black comic. They do some insane stuff in that is just like, I've never seen anything like that on a page before. You know, it's so cool. And yeah, you can do pretty much anything in movies now, but it's still just cool to see, like, for one, just from the creative aspect of like, people are allowed to take a big swing here.
Sky's the limit.
Yeah.
If you can draw it, you know, it can be done. I think kind of going into like a more personal aspect of it, of why I choose comics both to create and to engage with. I've always been someone who's been interested in storytelling. I've always wanted to be a storyteller, and I don't know if you know this, but making a movie is very hard. Making animation is incredibly hard. And some of that stuff is really hard to do by yourself. You know, even if you have like friends and other, you know, family, people who are willing to help you with stuff, collaboration is a very difficult thing, especially if it's sort of like something that exclusively you are interested in, or and this is a good thing, if you have a lot of friends that have multiple interests, you know, you don't necessarily want to be the person that's like dictating how they engage with their time. And so not being able to be someone who could make movies, and someone who feels like animation would be a better suit to the stuff I'd like to make, because again, you can do the impossible with animation. That's not as accessible for me. And so comics become, and it's not like a war of attrition of like, oh, this is the last thing. Like, oh, I'm doing this because it's the bare minimum. No, it's just, that's the power of comics, is it almost has that same power of an animated film or a movie. Obviously you're missing like the auditory aspect, which is a huge part of both those things, but it just feels like the most accessible thing that me as a single person could, you know,
convey my idea for here.
If I wanted to make a giant blockbuster, you know, skills warranted, obviously, like everything's up to your skill level and your creative storytelling potential. But if I wanted to tell an epic story, comic books would be an accessible way for me to do it, or at least to try to do it. You know?
I think that's something both of us, at least, you know, we'll talk about this more later when they're more solidified, but both of our kind of bigger projects right now are big projects. Like, they're big stories, that even in comic book form as single creators takes a long time to do this. And we are definitely, I think, pouring a lot into it. But that said, it's like, this is the way I can tell this story. This is the way I can kind of get this idea out without having to shop around for someone to hopefully give me enough money to make it happen, you know, and not without having to build up some certain level of credibility before, you know, like, it is a positive. It's not like, oh, I can't make my movie, I guess I'll just do a comic. It's
it's cool that you can make a comic. Like, it shows, it's sort of like it's there for you. Like, it's not a last resort. It is sort of like, here is a way of doing what you want to do, albeit different, in a way that you can do it. You know, and again, also comics are also a collaborative, you know, thing. I'm just saying, as solo creators, you know, entering into a duoship. We're going to do some collaborations in terms of actual comic making as well. But there's something about it that makes you go, oh, I could do this. Like I love when I look at a book. I've talked about it in the Encyclopedia of Early Earth in our top comics that we read, our first video that we put on the channel, that a lot of that was a single person working on it. And I love that somebody was able to have their singular vision. I'm sure they had a ton of help. And then they got to make something that they can hold. That's what I want, is I might not be able to make a movie that I can show on a big screen and, make no money from. But I can make a comic, and have something in my hand and be like, this is cool that I made it. And then also make no money from that.
No money from that either. But at least we won't be $100 million in the hole.
Exactly. There you go. That's just like a big part for me is not only accessible as a reader, but accessible as a creator.
Yeah. Just anybody can and should read comics. And anybody who wants to can and should make comics. You need a pencil and a piece of paper and you can make a comic, It's the working man's medium. It's the blue collar form for entertainment.
Well, there's like a weird lowbrow status to it, which I love lowbrow stuff. Don't get me wrong. I don't necessarily think that comics should have to have any, some negative connotations because of that. I don't know. It's just as worthy of an art form to me. It's just as worthy of a storytelling format to me. And here's the thing. If it gets somebody interested in either making art or telling stories, two of the things that we as humans, alongside obviously all of our, needs of eating and shelter and whatnot, we need those things to live. For me personally, art, if I wasn't an artist, I think I would just be dust. I don't know what I would be. And so the more ways that we can get people interested in this on a level that isn't sort of so, we live in the age of streaming services and FOMO, and I love the theater, but it's expensive to go to the theater. There's something really powerful about having a medium that is accessible, that you can read for free, that you can in some cases, or you can make yourself. Not that it's cheap to produce comics on your own, especially independently. Because we don't have a multi-million-dollar conglomerate fighting for over the rights of distributing our thing. But
not yet.
Yeah, just you wait. Invincible who? Batman who? Spider-Man? Spider-Man's gonna be forever, actually. We can't be Spider-Man. Anything else that you'd want to add to?
Well, I guess just kind of going off what you were just saying too. A big thing for me, and a big reason I think I've been kind of turning to them so much lately, is just gets you off your freaking phone, gets you looking at something that doesn't make you want to die.
Which is quite common these days, unfortunately. 2026. It's
been a good year so far.
Well, and again, I'm not trying to soapbox it, but I have an interesting relationship with the concept of escapism. I talk a lot about my own sort of artistic work. I think it is totally okay to have an escapist hobby, right? Something that takes you away from the world, to give you a break from the insanity. But I also think that it's dangerous to have too much escapism, and that's why I think something like comics is really good, because it reflects our world. Depending on the series, it reflects our world, our history in a way that you can look at, and I don't know. I feel like it can help you see our world better, or open you up to ideas that maybe you were not really understanding of. A lot of the time, I think it's fun to look at something maybe politically charged, like an old comic, and being like, wow, these are all the same problems that we're still facing today. This is really interesting. That here's what somebody in 1989 was thinking about at that same time, at that time, and why they felt the way that they felt. I think it's a good way to reflect on the world. And they also teaches you good skills to take into being a human,
Well, it's again, a lot of comic stories are very fantastical, very unrealistic in some senses, but in the same breath, especially on a monthly book, they're turned around relatively quick. So you can use comics as kind of a good gauge of just what were people dealing with? What were they thinking when
Is
these
it
came out?
reactionary? You know, is it reflective? Is it?
First thing that comes to mind for that is like the Marvel comics in the 60s, because obviously, you know, we know the 60s was a pretty transitional, turbulent political time. And you see it reflected in what today, I mean, again, we are dealing with a lot of the same issues, but in the same breath, a lot of what they talk about in those comics today, to us, kind of read as just like, well, yeah, of course, you know, but like...
Yeah, but it was, you know, an advancement for just the opening the conversation for them.
And so, and you see that, and like Watchmen is another good example, I think, of just people who are worried about post Cold War like nuclear doom. You know?
And government control and it's an interesting way because I think media literacy is something that should be honed. You know, people are really bad at it sometimes. It's funny that the magic of comics is also can trick people into liking the same thing but totally missing the message. Like,
all the people who think Homelander is cool.
Yeah, or don't, or like, I hate when they make X-Men woke and they have them.
It's always has been.
As if it wasn't an analogy for like discrimination and sort of like it's literally about mutants being discriminated against, you know, like as a means of portraying real world people, like also being discriminated against and othered, you know. Like it's the same thing with like something like Star Wars. Like it's fascinating to me that, you know, a guy like George Lucas, who was making that movie around the time of Vietnam and the Cold War and everything. It's amazing to me that people can go, yes, America is the
rebellion. Yeah.
It's like,
obviously.
How about this? Watch Apocalypse Now and tell me which side looks like the Empire and which side looks like the rebels. Because that's the intention that George Lucas had, right? Like, again, it's just kind of we always get, you know, people are going to think that we're of one ideology, but it's just kind of funny to point that stuff out. And
it's, again, and to my point of like getting off your phone, it's not a means of burying my head in the sand by any stretch. Yeah. It is a means of not being bombarded with a bunch of like a fucking slot machine of bullshit. You
exactly.
know?
Like, it's that to use the term of the youth, like that brain rot. You know, I dislike that we live in that world where it's like you want that immediate sort of neuron firing, you know, dopamine hit of like quick, fast, you know, low attention span. The one thing about comics is that you can engage with it on whatever level you want, and because they come in a variety of sizes, you know, if you have a low attention span where you're like, I can only read for a certain amount of time, read a single issue, you know, or if you have a greater attention span or you want to engage with something away from your phone or away from all the other distractions of the world, open up a big tome and read a chapter at a time.
But it's also hard to do it for like 6 hours. So like read for a couple hours and then go do something else.
Yeah, exactly. Like I've been trying to be better because it's sort of like, it is something I love to do, and it's something you want to make more time for. And it's sort of like each day I've just been trying to, wherever I can, find a little bit of time to read. Sometimes that's 30 minutes, sometimes it's an hour, sometimes it's longer. Regardless, however you do it, I think just doing it is the important part, you know. And you're not less of a comic fan if you read once a week.
Or once a month. Or, like
it's hard. You know, it's hard to find time to do all the stuff you got to do.
At the end of the day, the point we want to make with this video is essentially just to like, any preconceived notions you might have about comics are, especially if you haven't read them in a long time or haven't read them ever, might be wrong, and we would encourage you to give it a shot. There's such a huge variety of stories and genres. It's not just superhero books. We obviously are big fans of the superhero books, but we also, I think, read quite a lot of just other forms of comics and graphic novels and what have you. So we just encourage you to give it a shot. Hopefully you can relate to some of what we're talking about, and if not, let us know if you opened a comic book and you thought it was terrible.
This comic killed my dad.
It's
It
funny,
shot my dog.
It's funny that we're talking about comics being like a respite from stuff when back in the day they were seen like people were clutching their pearls about them and they were seen as like this is turning everyone's
to Satan.
Yeah, everyone's mind is turning to mush because they're reading Batman books.
I'm gonna let you in on a secret. Powerful people are afraid of people who can read and write. Because if you can read and write, you can ask questions. If you can ask questions, powerful people don't like that, right? So, if you want to stick to the man, read a comic book.